An aspect of George Grant's writing that is often underappreciated, especially by liberals or those a part of the sort of Canadian liberal establishment, such as Andrew Potter, and others who have written about Grant in the last couple decades. One thing that they don't appreciate as much, I feel, or at least do not cover the subject in as much depth as they should, is in particular with his philosophy of technology, of what he felt to be the homogenizing and the identitarian challenges related to a all-encompassing technologies that were coming in full steam ahead in the mid-20th century. And what he was talking about back then, of course, were technologies such as the television and the radio and these other mid-20th century communications technologies, which allowed messaging, advertisement, cultural events to be streamlined from particularly New York and Los Angeles into the Canadian airwaves. Today we face that, but also that in much greater power and capacity and capabilities related to how it affects our brain and how we have come to depend on it. It was all well and good in the 1950s. Watching TV when you come home from work. You've come to sort of have your leisure depend on the television, but your work activity, your knowledge and skills, and even how you relate to people necessarily, these things were not totally dominated by the television. Increasingly so as you get into the 1960s and 70s, but that's a moot point. Because what I'm getting at, obviously, in the 21st century, we find a world where digital technology and computer technology completely dominates in our entire life. And okay, perhaps I'm projecting. Maybe it doesn't dominate your life in the same way it dominates mine. Me being a graduate student at a university, a high-tech university at that. Fair enough. But I will say that the majority of upper middle class to elite individuals in this Canadian society and across the Western and increasingly the globe, we see groups of people that have their entire lifestyle dependent on, well, social media, computers, and now, artificial intelligence. And who knows where it goes from here. This topic among liberals, I feel like, from reading George Grant, was underappreciated. What this technology could do to the fabric of a people. And I think now, I don't know if it's ironic, but I think that message has now been lost on many of the upstart Canadian nationalists that we have seen arise from the ashes of Justin Trudeau's post-national Canada. In the vacuum of the vacuous prime ministership of Justin Trudeau, we get people filling the vacuum of presenting a strong, prideful, and meaningful national identity. I find that they don't know much about George Grant's message either, and I find they don't think much about this prescient subject. There was a certain prominent Canadian nationalist that I was listening to today who was asked by one of his listeners how he wants to, if he got power, how he wants to deal with the AI problem, as they put it, which is rather ominous and broad. And he says he just doesn't know much about it. Oh, it's powerful. I don't really know me, so I don't really know much about that. And I'm thinking, well, fair enough if it's not your interest. But if you're leading a movement that wants to hold power within the country and be able to achieve military success in order to claim and maintain some sort of sovereignty, from a practical, pragmatic point of view, there has to be a plan in order to either fight against the artificial intelligence in all its forms, or co-opt it in some way to make it work for you in some way. And there was just no thought of that. It's almost like it's too scary, and it's just they want to deflect it. They don't want to think about it because that would make their problem of fixing this mess of a country even larger, which is fair. And the mess comes from this. The mess that I'm describing and that George Grant was just somewhat describing, and I'm sure he would be describing if he was here today. The mess is this. Canadian nationalists prominent today can say that, the fault of the breakdown in our heritage Canadian, quote unquote, heritage Canadian identity is because the media has propagandized individuals to view themselves as such and separate from their group identity. They've demonized the group. They have disincentivized them from fighting back against cultural measures that hurt their group. This is what Canadian nationalists say the reason is for our demoralization. But they're missing a key point, and that is that there has been tremendous incentive for individuals and groups to enter the technological landscape, which is inherently global and which is inherently not cooperative, but de-ethnic. George Grant describes how the goal of a technological society is always to achieve the highest, most efficient, most effective form of that technology. And that achieving that most effective form, like getting the smallest computer chip. They're always saying how every year the computer chip is decreasing in size and being able to increase its storage capacity year over year. That goal triumphs all others. Well, if it means moving labor to China or importing those from South Asia to make that happen, we'll do so because our goal is to increase technological efficiency. And as Grant points out, this goal will inevitably homogenize the planet because every competitor in the global system will find that most effective way of doing it, and they will meet at this point, which is very similar. Whereas when technological progress is not the inevitable goal of the political, economic, and social system, cultures are much more distinct because they have many different ends, and those ends create distinct means and ways of being and ways of living. And so throughout the last 100 years, with the increase in the power of this technology, starting with the refrigerator, no, not starting obviously, but the early days having cars, telephones, refrigerators, people were incentivized to join cosmopolitan society because they were able to get and achieve these luxuries. Now people are pulled into this World Wide Web that we have, these networks that we have, and that's like a deal with the devil. It's like a not a Faustian bargain because it kind of is a Faustian bargain, but it's you're selling your primitive soul in order to achieve a new type of individuality or even a new type of group identity. Because when you enter this this technological system, you have all this newfound ability to make and develop new forms of social bonds. Perhaps that is a social media collective, a following of an icon. Maybe in the future it's being in the same metaverse, or following the same fashion trends that you find online, and then showcase that yourself in the world. There's all these different avenues that people will go down in this technological landscape that gives them a sense of meaning, of group identity. And so it's not just that the state has de-incentivized people from cooperating with their co-ethnics. Although that's certainly done in a sense, it's not the only reason for the sort of malaise that we are in. Hey, it's my cat. Aw. It's not the only reason for the malaise that we're in as a society. We're also grappled by the power of this communications, digital technology, which gives us incredible pleasure, which has taken over our receptors in here, and is constantly bombarding us with signals that we need to be checking something, or messaging somebody, or all these things. And so a nationalist movement needs to be disciplined enough to recognize this and have a plan to either deal with it, like I said before, deal with it or co-opt it in some way. Otherwise, you're either A, not going to get enough people to join your movement because they're all, on their screen, or B, you're going to get people who are just not motivated enough, who join but then will choose the other system. And if you kind of get where I'm going with this, there does seem to be an impasse, a crossroads that we're heading in our Canadian society, but in many other societies as well. Between those that will follow this technological establishment that's tied to the government and its tech apparati in Silicon Valley, in Canada, the Toronto, Alberta, Waterloo, Ontario. There are many, Edmonton, Waterloo, Toronto. There are many centers of technology in Canada. So will it follow this government apparati that is connected to technology and banking, which is funding it? This is a sort of symbiotic system that they've created. That's, for example, helping to fund this AI revolution. AI has soared in profit margin and net worth in terms of the industry. Partially because the banks have so much money and they're just funneling it all into this new industry where they think they can make a buck, and control the population. So, on the one hand, will you follow this apparatus as it goes to increasing lengths to whatever it will do? It will develop robot police, develop digital worlds for people to live in. Follow that with the promise of creating a new identity, and to be aligned with a new type of group in this identitarian malaise that we have now, where everybody feels sort of, not everybody, but a lot of people feel hollow and without purpose in their lives. So maybe they'll follow that. Or will you stick to and fight and cling on to this old world that holds on to the blood and soil, to old ideas of honor and of dying for a cause. You know, this the former road, the technological road, it promises immortality. And I think that this is at the root of many of today's political currents. This promise of immortality. I think that it was in the minds of the liberal progressive current, increasing scientific progress. You know, this has been in the minds of, for example, the Laurentian elite in Canada. I think that has been in the promise of immortality has been in their mind. But then, of course, in America, we have the rise of this new tech bro rightist elite that doesn't believe in the egalitarian ideas held by the progressives. No, they are elitist. They don't believe that every human being, doesn't necessarily has the same natural rights. They believe in more of a natural order of hierarchy, but at the same time, they want to use technology to better humanity, and maybe in particular the elites, and has no shame in saying such. I'm thinking of people like Peter Thiel, of course. And in Canada, we certainly have some of those people. I don't want to accuse them of anything, because I'm not necessarily even demonizing these people, more or less just describing them. But you can think of the BlackBerry crowd in Waterloo, people like Jim Balcelli and Mike Lazardis, who I'm sure have a complex political ideology. So I don't mean to characterize them. So then what I'm saying is this technological current is coming from many different worldviews, and it's dominating us because the technology is so powerful. Because a lot of us want to extend our lives. A lot of us want to gain opportunities and pleasures that could have never been thought of before. And so the urge is so strong. So we as nationalists, we should not brush it off as inconsequential, like something that's just happening in the background. This is a very dominant problem of our time. I mean, not even this is a choice that is going to be in the minds of all future generations. And perhaps we're entering what could be called a Techno-Feudal dark age. Perhaps we will see the dissolution of the political order into many smaller states in chaos. Maybe we'll see nuclear conflict. Perhaps we'll see a decentralization, which is how the dark ages of past have been characterized. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the political bonds that united Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa became separated, and tribal leaders from all over took over their small little areas. The same thing happened with the large-scale Bronze Age empires that broke up with the Bronze Age collapse. And so dark ages are characterized, among other things, by the breakup of centralized political systems. And so perhaps in this techno-feudal dark age, we will see the breakup of political units, but at the same time, each of those political units going down their own technological pathways. And in that system, it's survival of the fittest. So if you don't adopt the genetic modification, the cyborg, the military grade satellite scanning, the weather control, all these different technologies, if you don't adopt and pursue that, like the Canadian Nationalists don't seem to care much about doing, then you have the great potential of losing in a battle and war and being exterminated, like dark ages of the past have been known to do. Exterminate the weak. Whereas empires are actually, contrary to popular belief, empires are actually much more friendly than barbarian hordes that that roam around and pillage. The Roman Empire may have killed millions of the Celts and Gauls, but it doesn't compare much to what Genghis Khan did across the Middle East and Eastern Europe and China in the 13th century. Well, maybe it does compare, but the Romans had a much more civilized and sort of civilization building motto to them. They didn't necessarily want to exterminate everybody. They were happy to ingratiate many different groups of people into their empire. And so if we could keep this liberal world order dominated by America as we move along the technological age, maybe nationalists who want to preserve their blood and soil, their ethnic identity, perhaps they would have a better shot. Perhaps they could negotiate with the global empire. Hey, there's my cat again. Perhaps will she survive the technological age? Perhaps they would have a better chance of negotiating with the liberal empire. Perhaps the liberal empire would be more friendly to allowing these smaller groups who don't challenge them. That techno empire so powerful that, you know, if these nationalists have their own territory, you know, if a group like Return to the Land in America, in Arkansas, if they get more powerful, let's say, and they have like 30 different places around the country, you know, if the technological empire gets so powerful, the Return to the Land doesn't really challenge them because they don't have laboratories, they don't have data centers and all these things that are required in order to compete militarily, to challenge the monopoly on violence of the sovereign. So what I'm trying to say is that these are things that the nationalists should think about, because bringing about the end of empire and bringing about a more decentralized system might actually hurt nationalist human groups. And I say human because we might be entering a post-human age, right? If we become one with the machine, if we edit our DNA, if we do whatever else that we are going to do in the coming centuries. Perhaps these human nationalist groups have a better chance of survival underneath a global government of some sort. And it's funny to me because as we sit right now, at least what in the American context, as we have it right now, the traditionalists, the Christian religious elements, the ones that are rooted in place, they are aligned with the Republican Party, just as many of the entrepreneurial, anti-managerial ruling class tech bros are aligned with that party. And there was a video that was made by a Canadian, based in Toronto, I believe, a philosopher named Michael Millerman of the Millerman School. And he had made a whole video about this alliance between the traditionalists and the technologists and the future of it. How stable is it? And I found that video to be very informative, because the ontological and spiritual foundations are much different. The goals are much different, but they have a common enemy at this very moment, this liberal managerial ruling class, which is at the same time stifling both the entrepreneurial tech bros who want to innovate in their own way and create their own systems, and also upstart, or not upstart, but more so long-lasting identities of human ethno-religious groups. Both of both of both of those archetypes, of those groups, are stifled by the current order, by the current liberal order. And I think that we in Canada, among those who want a more meaningful existence, we ought to take note of this problem. Because if we don't, it will just continue to come to us. And we might think that in the process of technological innovation, there will inevitably be a collapse because of the absurdity of the system. You know, for example, if automation takes away everybody's job, then what room will there be left for the working class? And then when that happens, there must be a revolt. You know, I think these assumptions often dominate our psyche when it comes to the future. We think that it's inevitably going to collapse because of just the absurdity of a social system that's completely dictated by robotics and code and all these things. We want to believe that that is ridiculous because we, us in the have more of a nationalist collective view of humanity, or at least our cultural group. We want to believe that this system is absurd. Well, let me tell you, if you could show the way we live today to people even 150 years ago, hell, even 80 years ago, they might say, wow, that's absurd, and how the heck have there not been a riot revolt to that? And so don't underestimate what can be done over generations, how the young generations can be brought up and indoctrinated into accepting a certain world order, into accepting a certain social system. If children are raised a certain way, taught a certain way, to believe that certain things is the natural way of existence, is the correct way of existence, if it's completely normal to be raised with an AI teaching you and being your friend, if that's completely normal, don't underestimate the quickness of change that can occur within a generation. It takes people that have the power of will and the knowledge and the vision for an alternative to fight against, and the resources, the skills to fight against it. And so perhaps we need a counter elite in Canada, a counter tech elite in Canada, who both can understand the technology and use it into a certain capacity, while also using it to protect a more sacred image of humanity, of our humanity, who does not want to transform humanity, especially for the ends of a global empire. But these are extremely tough challenges, and I know that people have been making fun of me because I use the word profound a lot. But this crossroads that we face, this generation's which way Western man, I think is extremely, if not profound, I believe it's extremely important that we think about it. And so if we want to preserve, let's say, English Canada, or even a regional identity within Canada, let's say if Nova Scotians want to preserve their traditional maritime identity, then, just as an example, it ought to develop a strategy of interfacing, interacting, and co-opting technological power. Without that, the nationalist groups are at risk of low buy-in and the attraction of lower skilled individuals. And I don't mean to say that those in the nationalist group right now are lower skilled and do not have the capabilities of carrying out a mass movement of some sort. I think there's plenty of people that are extremely likable and talented in many of their capabilities. When I say low skilled, I mean specifically in order to fight against the incoming technological encroachments onto everyday society, whether that comes from a technological empire such as the United States of America, or in a hypothetical post-apocalyptic techno-feudal dark age in which this is funny to say, but technologically advanced fiefdoms fight each other over small bits of territory. If nationalist groups don't bring into the fold people with certain skills and know-how, they have the risk. They run the risk of being left behind. Perhaps this isn't on their mind because they view other immediate threats to their identity as a bigger challenge. And they could be right. But all I would say to them is that maybe we're facing compounding crises. And so I'd encourage them to read closely George Grant's Technology and Empire. Thank you very much.